Like it or loathe it, Adobe's Lightroom Classic remains an incredibly popular asset manager and RAW editor with photographers, whether they're hobbyists or professionals. According to the most recent financial data, there's about 33 million paid customers on Adobe's various subscription tiers. A number has doubled in the last 5 years despite a metric shit ton of negative press. And while usage data for each app in the Creative Cloud suite is not publicly available, it's obvious that Lightroom is far and away the most popular asset manager / RAW editor on the market, with apps like Capture One coming in a very distant second. Lightroom was first released in 2007, and this week Adobe rolled out version 14, now called Lightroom Classic to differentiate it from the more recent cloud-centric version. Thought it was a solid opportunity to give it the Andy Hutchinson review treatment. Whatever your stance on Adobe's moral, financial, and ethical behavior, Lightroom sits atop the Iron Throne of raw photo editing software. Its reign, though not unchallenged, shows no signs of ending anytime soon. Alright, before we get into it, this is an in-depth review, so feel free to use the chapter markers below. If you're just interested in the new stuff, then skip ahead to the version 14 update marker, where I assess the new and updated features. I also have no affiliation to Adobe whatsoever. I'm a paying customer on the photography plan, which means I can stick the boot in should it be necessary. As to my experience with this software, I've been using Lightroom on my Macs and very occasionally on Windows since version 4, which came out in 2012, when I decided I wanted to bring some order to my chaotic and sprawling collection of landscape photographs. It's been my daily driver ever since, and I've watched it transform from a basic organizational and post-processing tool into a feature-heavy behemoth. Unlike most apps, which are focused on executing one particular task, Lightroom has a split personality and two entirely different purposes. Let's kick things off by talking about the first of those purposes, asset management. The central purpose of an asset management app is not simply to file away your photographs, but to make it as easy as possible for you to find them in the future. In Lightroom, that begins when you ingest your images into its catalog database, because you can have metadata and keywords on the import screen. Asset management in Lightroom takes place in the library module, and it's a layout that hasn't changed substantially for quite some time. There's no need for it to change. It works. The interface is broken down into 4 primary chunks. You've got your navigation over on the left here, your masonry / loop view with all your thumbnails in the center. You've got your keywords and metadata on the right, and you've got your little thumbnail strip down the bottom of the screen. Asset management is split between file management, which you can see catalog and folders, which is actual kind of file browser, and the more database driven stuff, which you get when you ingest it into your application. So you have things like manual collections and smart collections. If you want, you can do all your keywording from this part of the application. You can have these suggestions, which are thrown up by Lightroom, or you can create your own sets if you're regularly going to a location or you're shooting in a studio, for instance. You can do one-click addition of keywords. Adobe are the most nimble-footed company in the world when it comes to software updates, which can lead to some strange outcomes. For instance, every time there's a major release of Lightroom Classic, the database that drives the entire app needs to be updated, which, for safety reasons, means creating a new one. It used to be the case that you can change the name of your library, which meant that my main catalogue was, at one point, called Landscapes-1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1. Then they changed it so you could rename your catalog just prior to the database upgrade. And now, in version 14, 17 years after it first came out, the catalog upgrade no longer requires a name change. What do you fucking do? You can even, can't believe I'm saying this, rename your catalog when you want to from the main file menu. That's true innovation, right there. But while Adobe moves slowly with the library module updates, the thing about its asset management is that it just works. There are 4 main ways of finding the photograph you're looking for in Adobe Lightroom Classic. Got text, attribute, metadata, and map. Text is basically any string of text attached to any of your photographs in the keywords or the file name. Attribute is things like whether it is a starred photograph, so if you've got 4 stars, you can drill down according to that. Metadata is very useful. You can, for instance, search according to specific camera types or focal lengths. And then finally, the most useful by a mile as far as I'm concerned is the map search, where you can search according to a specific location. You can type in that location in the search box, or you can just browse around the map and it will show you any of the photographs that you have GPS metadata added to. So for instance, if I just wanted to see all the photographs that I took over in Nara, I can zoom in on the map. I've got 2 blocks of photos selected here. I select visible on map and I can just see those photographs in the thumbnail view. I currently have over 222,000 photographs in my main catalog. I can quickly and efficiently access any of those photos with very little delay, despite the fact that they're stored on several shitty mechanical external hard drives. I use smart collections to help manage all of those photographs, with the images updating dynamically once I've set the filtering criteria. The other main function of Lightroom Classic is, of course, to process your raw photographs, and this is an aspect of the app which has thankfully improved over the years. Why do we edit raw photographs? Well, it's quite simple, isn't it? It's because there's all sorts of data that the camera sensor can record when it's taking a photograph, and if you're shooting JPEG, you lose out on a lot of that data. When you shoot RAW, you get all of it. And so here we have an image, for instance, this huge concealed area here, this mountain, which is heavily in shadow. However, the information is there. All we have to do is lift the shadows to make it appear. Now, there's nothing revolutionary about that, of course. This is what all RAW editors do. But the thing is, Lightroom used to come in for a lot of flack about its RAW editing prowess, and there was a huge migration from Lightroom to Capture One about 10 years ago, around about the same time, coincidentally, that Adobe introduced a subscription-based model for the Creative Cloud, but let's not go there. And ever since then, certain corner of society have been criticizing Lightroom for its raw processing chops. Let me tell you, I've been all over, up and down every single RAW editor on the market, and Lightroom is right up there these days with the best of them. Is it the best RAW editor on the market? No, I think DxO Photolab 8 is the best, but I think there's very little at all between Photolab, Capture One, and Lightroom. And certainly you can get the best out of your photographs when you're processing them in Lightroom. It does, of course, have a huge number of features, so allow me just to call out some of the highlights. We have a color mixer down here with a point color tool, which enables you to precisely target tones. A couple of releases ago, Adobe added a color grading with the color wheels. This is something that's been in Capture One and some of the other RAW editors for a little while. Enables you to increase luminance and saturation levels at any point on the color range or the dynamic light range. Lightroom has massive support for a huge range of cameras and lenses, probably the most of any RAW editor on the market, and you can attach lens corrections either manually or using one of the built-in profiles from the lens correction swatch. Inside the Detail tab, you can find the Denoise button. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We also have some extra functionality. We've got the Crop tool here. We've also got the Remove tool, which uses generative AI to remove annoying items from your photograph. Again, more on that in a minute. We've also got a red eye tool. If you shoot portraits, I mean, it's not really an issue anymore, is it? Red eye. And finally, we have the mask tool. And it has to be said, Adobe Lightroom Classic has the best masking tools of any RAW editor on the market. And I'll fight you in the town square if you disagree with me. In my experience, there's a lot of cyclically repeated bad information in photography circles, and at their core, it's usually someone defending a purchasing decision that they regret. To that I say, don't believe the hype. Capture One is a perfectly fine RAW editor, particularly if you're a studio photographer. But it sure as shit doesn't magically handle color the way some intense cats will tell you it does. The demosaicing, calibration and profiles in Lightroom are excellent, easily as good, if not better than Capture One. But honestly, it's all relative and depends to a great extent on the type of RAW files you're working on and whether or not you use natural or artificial light. I don't play favorites here, and I don't think you should either. If you're in the market for a new RAW editor, then download the 30-day trials, import some of your RAWs, and buy the one that looks best to your eye. Because ultimately, that's all that matters. Alright, before we get into the new stuff in version 14, we just need to talk about masks, because it's a huge point of difference between Lightroom and its competition. There are two reasons why the masking tools in Lightroom are the preferred option for many photographers: AI and Boolean operations. One of the many reasons that photographers like Lightroom is due to the comprehensive masking facilities. There are three kinds of masks in Lightroom. There are AI masks, there are range masks, and there are traditional masks. AI masks are subject, sky, background, objects, and people. The traditional masks are linear gradient and radial gradient, and the range masks are color, luminance, and depth. Thanks to the Boolean functions where you can add, subtract, and intersect masks, these can also be used in conjunction with each other, which makes them exponentially more powerful. So let's see the masks in action. Here's the sky mask. Click that, one click, and it's selected it. It's done an okay job, but you can see it's missed out this portion of sky here on the horizon, but that's okay. We can use the Boolean function add, perhaps with just the brush, to paint in that portion of the mask. Now, as I do that, you'll notice that the auto mask function is working as well. So it does edge detection. The AI mask in Lightroom is a long way from perfect, but because you can quickly and easily add, subtract, and intersect one mask with another, it's possible to get refined results quickly. Okay, that's the core features. Now let's talk about the new stuff. And if you skipped here from the intro, long time no see, there will be no toilet breaks from here on in. The big updates in this version 14 release of Lightroom Classic are improved Generative Remove, content credentials, expanded Denoise support, and faster navigation in the Develop module, along with some new adaptive presets. We first saw Generative Remove in Photoshop, and it was added as a beta feature in the previous version of Lightroom. But now it's an official feature. Adobe are claiming there are improvements to the Generative Remove in Lightroom Classic 14, but I've got to tell you, I'm failing to see them. Specifically, they are saying there is now improved selection and object detection. This surprises me because I'm not seeing any object detection at all. For instance, let's remove this pelican on the right here. I'm going to select the Generative Object Remove tool. I've got Use Generative AI ticked and Detect Objects. Now, let's paint around our subject that we want to remove and his shadow in the water there. get rid of all that. And I'm not expecting Lightroom to struggle greatly with this, but remember, the claim is object detection, so I would expect it to recognize that there is an object within this area I've marked out and to remove only that. But I know from my testing that is not the case. Let's kick it off and have a look at the results. So as I suggested it would do, it's done a pretty good job of removing our pelican and its shadow, but it's removed all this other stuff around the edge. Where is this object detection that's supposed to be going on that Adobe have highlighted in this release? I'm not seeing any evidence of it all. And just to prove that that is in fact the case, let's zoom in on this area here, and you can clearly see where the generative remove has happened and where it's nice and clean and sharp outside the line. That brings us along to the second big problem with generative remove, which is that it's very low resolution. I suggest that it's only good for online or social media. It's certainly no good whatsoever for print if you're removing anything larger than a dust spot from your photograph. And to show you precisely what I mean, here's a photograph. I removed that bar. Great, it's done a good job of removing that and filling it. It's a miracle of modern technology, except if you zoom in, you see a very different situation. Let's zoom in. And here you can see the line where the generative remove is kicked in. We've got this very low resolution, kind of blurry area in here, and this beautiful crisp area above, which was outside the generative remove area. The third problem that I have encountered with the generative remove is some weird stuff going on in my photographs. Here we've got a boat. Let's say I wanted to remove the boat. I'm going to just highlight the area and its shadow, and there we go. That's the area it's decided. Again, this object detection isn't great, is it? It could take out this whole area here. It doesn't need to remove all that, but it's not detecting objects. But that is an issue with this. If you watch what happens when I remove this. So what's happening here? If I click through the options, you can see all three of them have this ghost shadow area where the boat previously was. So yes, generative AI is supposedly out of beta and in the full production version of Lightroom, but I would suggest it's not really ready for production yet. Considering that these so-called improvements to generative remove got top billing in the release notes, I'm surprised how mediocre the results are. In some cases, you'd probably be better off just making a rectangular marquee and giving a Gaussian blur filter at 500%. Next up in the release notes is improvements to the Denoise tool. And Adobe have increased the range of support for camera and image formats to include Fuji X-Trans RAWs, Canon S and M RAW, and more importantly, linear DNGs. That last one means you can now use Apple ProRAW DNG files, amongst others, with the Lightroom Classic Denoise tool. As a Fujifilm user myself, I was excited by the improved support for my camera's sensors, but I was also pleased to see that I could now use the AI Denoise and Sharpen tools on other DNGs, such as the ones I generate when I do exposure stacking with Lightroom's own HDR tool. Here's how it all looks in practice. I ran my high ISO Fuji X-Trans RAW files through the new denoising algorithm in Lightroom, and by way of an example, I also put them through DxO Photolab 8, which used the existing XT2 algorithm to denoise them, not the newer XT2S, because that is not yet compatible with Fuji RAWs. So let's have a look how they did. So this is the sample file. One of them is a 12,800 ISO photo. And as you can see, it looks like an impressionist painting. I think any result from any software to improve this is a miracle. Let's see how they did. Let's zoom out of that and we will select our two photos and go into comparison mode. So we have Lightroom on the left and DxO on the right. Zoomed out, both look absolutely brilliant and cleaned up the image nicely. But there's a different story when we zoom in. We can see we've got much better detail retention on the DxO XD2 version. Let's check out another region, the horse's mane. We can see we've got nice detail, the hairs here, and it's looking quite blurry, almost in fact sort of AI looking on the Lightroom version. Let's check out another image. Here is my photograph of the supermoon over the Denoise headland, and as you can see, like the other shot, extremely noisy, 6400 ISO. Let's see how the two applications did. So let's select them and go into comparison mode. So we've got DxO on the left, Lightroom on the right. Let's zoom in. As before, we have better detail retention on DxO. Both have cleaned up the image nicely. The background patina is definitely better in DxO. It's cleaned it up a little bit more, but they're both really good. In order to have a similar baseline output for my tests, I set the strength sliders to the 50% mark, which I found gives the best indications of the app's abilities to balance detail and noise removal. Bottom line is that Adobe's Denoise is still not as good as DxO's, despite the fact that I had to use the 18-month-old XD2 algorithm and not the newer XD2S version. If Adobe improved their detail retention, it will be tough to spot the difference between the two. But let's be honest, both apps are doing an incredible job tidying up what would ordinarily be a completely unusable image. I wouldn't complain about having access to either of them. I also tested my iPhone ProRAW photos with the Denoise tool in Lightroom Classic and was impressed. The enhanced RAW option is disabled for linear DNG files, but even so, it's definitely enhancing edge definition, and the results were excellent. Here is an Apple ProRAW photograph. You can see the .dng extension on it. I'm here in the Details tab, and we can see we've got Denoise. If I click on that, you'll notice that the RAW Details option is not enabled, so that RAW Enhance isn't an option. However, I have found that it does, in fact, enhance the image. So here is our freshly denoised ProRAW file. Let's go to comparison mode and see what they look like. Zoom in here, and we can see that it's done a good job of tidying up background noise. This is smoothed out nicely, but also notice that the detail is definitely enhanced. It's much crisper. Look at the two birds here. They're very blurry on the original linear DNG ProRAW file, much crisper on this one. I'll show you another example of that. Let's zoom in on this location here. So we've got the Denoise version on the left, the original on the right. We can see we've got much better definition in the trees, much better definition on the edge of the escarpment here in the distance, better definition in the twigs on the tree. So whilst it isn't saying it's enhancing the raw files, it definitely is. Adobe's third big new feature in Lightroom Classic is somewhat ironic, given that they're betting the farm on AI. Yes, you can now add content credentials to your photographs when you export them. A digital signature, if you like, which shows all of your edits and can prove, should you wish to do so, that you haven't used AI to enhance anything. The signature in question can either be stored in the cloud, which makes it much harder to delete, or attached to or within the photo. Nothing will stop the entire planet from being overrun by shitty AI-generated content, and content credentials will make no difference to that whatsoever, but at least it's something. With this October 2024 release of Lightroom, Adobe have added some big new features, fixed up some feature gaps, and sorted some performance problems. Of all the changes, the one which I actually found most welcome is the speed increase in the Develop module. The Generative Remove tool is clever, but extremely limited in terms of its potential application. Even for an image you only ever plan to use online, the low-resolution patched area of the photo is obvious. The Denoise tool has definitely improved, and Adobe continued to inch closer to DxO's XD2 algorithms. But it's weird that a company that can make $6 billion in profit a year, and which employs over 29,000 people, can't be the equal of a company which makes $5 billion in profit and employs 90 people. It also strikes me that while the AI technologies Adobe choose to embed in Lightroom, such as the masking and the denoising, are welcome, they need to be looking at their wider application and how that AI can be brought to bear on things like asset management. Whatever you feel about Adobe and its shit-awful track record in terms of ethics, there are few apps that get close to the feature set and capabilities of Lightroom Classic, and fewer still that can match its versatility and workflow. There are plenty of us out there who would gleefully jump ship if someone came up with an application that matched Lightroom's feature set and flexibility, and which costs no more than the $12 a month Adobe charged for that photography bundle. But while there are apps that excel in certain very specific ways, there is nothing that is as capable and all-rounder as Lightroom Classic, the Swiss Army knife with a subscription fee. And that will do us for this look at Adobe Lightroom Classic version 14. Are you an Adobe subscriber? Have you always been here? Or did you leave and then come back? Do let me know in the comments section below. If you got value from this content, then do please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel for more photo, video, and drone-related content from yours truly. Till the next time, guys. Ta-ta.